After this I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white, with palm branches in their hands. They were praising God, all of them. And John says, I don't know who they are. And one of the elders answers, these are they who have come out of the great ordeal. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason, this is why they're before the throne of God. And they worship. These are the ones who experienced the greatest trauma of their lives. Some absolutely horrific. Because we all do, right? And they came through just as they knew that they would. A great multitude, so great they couldn't be counted, and from everywhere. They all experienced trauma. They all experienced hardship, difficulties, pain, and they all had some kind of hope. And because of this, for this very reason, they worship. And we worship. One of our members emailed me this past week, and it was so beautiful and relevant to today's conversation. And so I got permission just to read some of what she said, because it's so beautiful. She asked whether I'd read Anne Voskamp's 1,000 Gifts. And I highly recommend this. And she says this: this book has been lying on my bookshelf for a long time until I picked it up this summer. I didn't expect to be drawn into it. It would be something that I would read or to pass the time, that kind of thing. But her writing, her prose into poetry, drew me into this concept of giving thanks for everything, coming out of good or bad. Out of her encounters with the worst of life, she has written inspiring bits of hope. And I just love how this friend of ours even writes about this. It's so beautiful. She describes the beauty of her words into sentences, into paragraphs, into images is captivating and challenging. Beyond the enjoyment in reading, I was in need of this kind of reminder of how God works in life. She makes the most mundane moment with a child's anger and works love into that moment. She describes a cornflower and contrasts it with children dying in hunger. How can God be in both of those scenarios, she asks. God is in both beauty and ugliness. And it is in the ugliness that I have to find my faith in God. So I've been challenged to find thanks in the moments of despair, 1,000 of them, not just when happiness reigns. And she says it has to do with the enormity and complexity of God and God's unfailing love in our world. Isn't that beautiful? For this reason, they're before the throne of God and worship God day and night within this temple. And the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more and cough no more and taste always. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd and will guide them to springs of water of life. And God will wipe every tear away from their eyes. Every provision here that the elder lists is told in the future tense. And it's active, the active future tense, as if it is already occurring while happening in the future, because God's timeless, right? God will shelter them. They will not be hungry again. Future, active, indicative. There's no doubt this will happen. And it has not yet happened. Still, they worship and they praise God in the hope, as if, living as if. See, look, open your eyes. Shema, like I said, I was talking about last week. It's not, you need to obey, it's hear, receive it, gaze, spend time in it, pay attention, notice. God's love is ours. We belong to God. We are God's heir. This love of a parent, a perfect one who loves without conditions, because sometimes we do. We are God's progenies. And that is what we are now, present, indicative, indicates who we are. Beloved, we are God's children now, semicolon. What we will be has not yet been revealed. What we do know is this. When God is revealed, we will be like God. We will see God as God is. And another translation of this is, we will see God face to face. And that's how we become like God, because we will see. But for now, we cannot look at God straight on. Just as we witnessed with Moses a few weeks ago in the readings, he had to hide in the crevice and see God's backside passing by. We cannot look directly at God because our meager eyes cannot withstand the view. And we know, even just with our feeling eyes, how much our eyes just don't have the capacity. It would blind us. It would utterly devastate us. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. Or perhaps our eyes are not yet adjusted to perceive God's face, because we're not yet like God, which of course can happen only when we do see God as God, that is, face to face. So there's something that I was just reading that kind of describes this a little bit better. Of course, so many people are just incredible writers, so but I wanted to share this because it describes it so beautifully. It's called The Sea in the Sky by Jackson Musker. And it's an Audible original series about the near future in the 2040s or something like that. And they have this two-person mission to go to a moon of Saturn, because they had sent a probe out there and it looked like they had all that moon has, and I think this is based actually on fact, that there's all the conditions that for life to start. I mean, it's all ice and water, but other than that, that's the nitrogen and oxygen and all that needs to initiate life. So they wanted to send people out there, and this two-person thing, it's 3 years to drive, take a spaceship out there one way, 3 years. And NASA never has enough funding, so they have some problems. There's an accident on one of the exploratory jaunts. This crucial piece of equipment is damaged beyond repair, and they all realize they won't be able to get back to Earth, and there's no one who's going to be able to make a rescue. I just can't imagine making a trip like that, not knowing if you could get back. Anyway, the pilot basically sacrifices himself in order to give the younger scientist, B, the time to survive and to find the evidence they hadn't yet been able to acquire. Sometime after they were originally scheduled to return, and they still hadn't gotten the evidence that they really were hoping for, but sometime after that, B sends a voice memo back to mission support on Earth, and this is what she describes. She says, "We've entered an eclipse. I felt it even before I saw it. The sky got darker and darker. Every day Saturn was blotting out more and more of the sun, and now it's complete. The sun's gone. Well, almost gone. There's just a halo of light around a dark Saturn. This perfect, shimmering circle. You can see it through the window. The planet records say that the eclipse happens once every 15 years. Apparently, it'll stay this way for a few months. The best part? You know how we couldn't ever see Saturn's rings? When they were there on the moon, they couldn't see Saturn's rings. And she says her colleague would say, "You can't always see what you're sitting in." Well, that's not true anymore. Direct sunlight washes out the rings. Indirect sunlight like this makes them shine as if they're made of crystal. Like when someone's silhouetted, you can't really see them, but you can see the edges of them, their hair, you know? And it's half on fire. That's what I'm swimming in right now. A dust cloud, half on fire. The darks are black, and the lights are brilliant, and somehow the rings, they've been here the whole time. But I can finally see them. I'm not so sure space is a vacuum. Everything seems to touch everything else. I wasn't supposed to be here for this. I'm glad I am. Came through the great ordeal. Left alone over 1 billion kilometers from home, reconciled to living maybe 6 more years. And she can finally see what she is sitting in all its stunning, brilliant beauty. We are all in need of a reminder of how God works in life. Now, encountering the worst and finding hope within it. In the midst of thousands of moments of despair, seeing, noticing, paying attention to what you're sitting in. Opening our eyes as we gaze on the deepest darkness, oppressive even, and perceiving the outline of light's reality. And not only recognizing the light, but paying attention to the stunning, profound beauty that the light silhouettes around us and around each other. That darkness. Keeping our gaze on the outlines of light's reality. Time enough to perceive that the dust that emanates from our situation reflects the light so they fairly shimmer, half on fire. To finally see what has already, always been here. And B wasn't supposed to still be there at the time of the eclipse. Would have missed this. Would not have had time to stop and just look, even if she were. And she ends up discovering so much more. It has to do with the enormity and complexity of God and God's unfailing love in our world. Behold, see, not just look at, but behold this love God has for us. Gaze at it. Open your eyes. Shema, listen, pay attention. Notice that God's love is ours. We belong to God, God's heir, a perfect love without conditions. We are God's progenies. That is what we are, present, indicative right now. Beloved, we are God's children now. We don't know what we will ultimately be yet. What we do know is this: God will be revealed and we will be like God. Does that even compute? When we can see God as God is, not as how we create God in our own image, in our politics, in our fantasies, we can see God as God is. Creator who breathed, spoke a word, and we came into being, God's very image and likeness, each one of us, each one of you. For we then will see God as God is. We will, and we are already seeing in each other. Look God in the eye, face to face. And we can do that, see God, when we look each other in the eye, because we can't see each other's mouths. So now that's all we have. But even now, we can see that beauty of the light around the deepest darkness. And that is what we do when we remember those who have died and gone before us, the saints who came before us. The darkness of their loss, a black hole of loss sometimes. The darkness holds in stark relief the shimmering light of God's love, God's visage, God's presence, that we would likely miss if we didn't stop in these moments like today and remember and consider all that these people and all that God has shown us of God through them.